Hello. So I've been reading this book, The History of Philosophy by A.C. Grayling, and I've recommended this book to a lot of people. And it occurred to me, people always ask me, where should you start with philosophy? And I actually recommend this book and a few others. And it occurred to me that I should probably answer this question now that he is recommending his own way. We're kind of talking about his own way of starting philosophy. So his way of starting philosophy is to go, which I think is very stereotypical, is to go through the pre-Socratics. He also gives a background explanation of how philosophy has changed. He says, for example, philosophy went from just a rational inquiry into some domain of life, which was not locked behind a technical jargon or field, to then professional philosophy, where now you have philosophers who speak in jargon, and it's not easy to understand for the average person. Whereas historically, it was easy to understand for the average person. And so he says you have now the rational inquiry into a domain of life to the professionalism. And he gives that as a little bit of an introduction. And then he goes into the early philosophers, I think starting just before Athens and then going into the philosophers of Athens. So that's kind of what he's doing. And that's actually how a lot of people approach philosophy in terms of teaching it. They'll teach you, for example, Plato, maybe Aristotle, and then Socrates, and then maybe you'll go to Hume, Kant, Schopenhauer, maybe people like this, right? You get into these different philosophers. Another way of starting philosophy is just to go through argumentation theory as well, I should say. But the way I think you should start philosophy, and kind of now I'm going to answer people's questions, is I think you should go straight to epistemology, and in specific, I think you should go straight to skepticism. There's a lot of other stuff in philosophy, like ontology, ethics, or value theory, that can be debated ad nauseum. For example, the debates in ethics about duty versus consequence, like utilitarianism versus deontology, has been going on for hundreds of years. And the way to solve that debate, I think, is to go straight to skepticism and try and debunk skeptics. So you could, for example, start with I should probably say that not all skepticism is equal, but you'll probably start with something like Descartes' skepticism, right? Or you could say skepticism about the external world. You could then move on to maybe skepticism about causation. But I think the kind of skepticism that matters the most is sometimes called Pyrrhor skepticism or Sextus Empiricus skepticism. And it's just basically asking for any standard of evidence that you give, justify that standard of evidence. And usually what people will do is they will then provide the same standard of evidence. So for example, if you say falsifiability determines whether something is a scientific theory or not, well, is the theory of falsifiability itself falsifiable? Because where did that come from? Well, that itself is just a piece of philosophy, right? That itself is not falsifiable. So the standard of falsifiability cannot be applied to itself. You could say the same thing with the standard of seeing. So how do I know the apple is red? Well, I see the apple. Okay, well, do you see, how do we know your sight is valid? Right, it's the next question. Well, let's apply the standard of seeing. Well, you can't see yourself seeing yourself. And so seeing doesn't justify seeing. And so the standard of evidence that you asserted, namely that you can see it, is itself not justified by the same standard of evidence, aka seeing. And once you try and solve this problem, you realize that everything else in philosophy is just presupposition. Now, by the way, that is itself a presup. That is an axiom. I can't prove that. And I'm totally self-aware about that, right? Everything I'm saying is unjustified. But the burden of proof, namely for the claim that that is itself a problem, right? Saying that everything is arbitrary is bad is itself a positive statement that you would have to justify. And since you're not going to be able to do that, for the most part, I can ignore you. But that also means I can't be ridiculous in bad faith when I do philosophy, right? So once you get through skepticism, it means that philosophy also becomes about agreements. It's like a good faith discussion to come to a resolution. It's not a pursuit of what is true about the world and what is certain, and how can you justify things? How can I know about the things around me? It's about how can I get the outcomes I want using a model that other people will agree with. And I always give the thought experiment of like the anti-realist about morals and the realist about morals. I don't really care if somebody says that theft is evil. I don't really care about that. What I care about is that both the person who believes in morals, or doesn't believe in morals, and believes in morals, prefers not to do theft. And I need to provide a set of reasoned conclusions that both parties will agree with in order for them to be persuaded into the behavior of not committing theft. And because I'm now a skeptic, I don't need to worry about finding the true model, which puts a huge constraint on you. I can just find one that works. And yeah, so that's why I think you should, coming back to the main point, start with skepticism. This is not bad, right? If you go this route, you'll eventually, what will probably happen to you is you'll jump between different philosophers and be like, oh, that one's really convincing. I think he has truth. And then you'll come to this one and be like, oh, but this one has a really good argument here, which is a bit more persuasive than that one. I think he has truth. And you'll keep doing this until you come across skepticism. Like, I've seen people who still do that cycle all the way into their 50s and 60s. I did that cycle for many years myself. And if I would have restarted philosophy over, I would have wished I had come to skepticism first, just to avoid wasting too much time jumping between different philosophers who I know don't have genuine answers, even though I thought they did at the time. So yeah, you can take this route. It's not terrible. And I do recommend you at least read these people so that you don't reinvent the wheel, so to speak. And I think he says that in the book. But you should start with skepticism. That's my take. If you have a different take, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say, because it's fun to debate this. But that being said, bye-bye.